The Chicago Bears 2025 schedule looks manageable, with a few tough stretches, some big national broadcast games, and a lot of opportunity for Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams to control their own destiny.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1, and you can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is all about the Bears' schedule. We'll take a look at some of the biggest games to note. We knew the opponents already, but now we know the order and when they will be played. So starting out on primetime is a big part of that. The early bye week will be a big factor. The divisional games, some key stretches throughout, and some key opponents to keep an eye on here. And then we'll go through a win-loss prediction, sort of game by game here, and kind of look at where the Bears might land and kind of where the range of expectations should be, given how the schedule looks on paper. I always hesitate to get, too ahead of ourselves here because it is still just on paper, and these teams are still becoming the final versions of themselves. The teams that look really good right now might not be as good in the season, and vice versa. But I think that sort of volatility and that unknown factor sets the stage for the Bears' season opening game against the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football. And as far as week one matchups can go, I think this is about as favorable as you could hope in terms of it's not the worst team on the Bears' schedule, but I think there's a really strong opportunity for Chicago to come out and win a key divisional game in front of a national audience to open their season and start the Ben Johnson era. Because when I think about the Vikings in week one, yes, Minnesota was a 14-win team last season and still retained a lot of the talent on their roster, but this will be the first ever NFL action for J.J. McCarthy. And when you have essentially a rookie quarterback starting in week one, there's a lot of anything can happen. And most likely, they're not going to have the offense wide open for J.J. McCarthy to do whatever he wants. They're probably going to have things a little bit more simplified. And J.J. McCarthy is still going to be getting used to NFL speed. And J.J. McCarthy also isn't going to have tape on this Chicago Bears defense. And Brian Flores isn't going to have tape on the Chicago Bears offense, because it's brand new coaches. They know the players and some of what they're capable of, but not the scheme with these players in it. The Bears won't have NFL tape of J.J. McCarthy, but they will have tape of this Minnesota Vikings offense, of this Vikings offensive line, of running back Aaron Jones, of this Brian Flores defense. And that doesn't mean they're going to be able to figure out absolutely everything the Vikings are going to do, but I think the advantage for playing in week one is in the Bears' favor there, that they're going to be able to glean more about the Vikings than the Vikings will about the Bears. Plus, the early volatility of J.J. McCarthy, I think, will limit some of what the Vikings can do. And I think that's a great opportunity for the Bears to start off this season with a win in primetime. Ben Johnson's debut, especially the Vikings on Monday Night Football, they have a long history of these two teams. And I think you could do a lot worse starting with a team that is just going to mollywop you in week one, or if you start with a team that you just know is going to be really bad and you feel like, well, we didn't really learn anything, and it wasn't really wasn't really much of a challenge. I think the Vikings can be just enough of hey, it's not going to be a walk in the park, but you should have the advantage and should be able to win that game in week one. That's sort of the first thing that jumped out to me about this Bears schedule. The second thing then right away is the bye week. Week 5, very early in the schedule. I believe that's as early as the NFL will allow it. There's no bye weeks in the first 4 weeks of the season. And then the first bye you can possibly have is week 5. And that's when the Bears get it. I think that stinks generally. It's not going to make or break their season. But a very, very early bye week is particularly tough. I'd almost rather have a very late bye week than a very early bye week. But ideally, as close to the middle of the season as possible. Because you only really have 4 games under your belt. And is that enough of a sample size to then go into the bye week and say, hey, here's what we need to change. Here's what we want to do differently and get better. I mean, the Bears had, what was it, week 6 or week 7 bye week last year, and it came at a nice time where they could try and adapt some stuff after having a nice successful stretch beforehand. But under Matt Eberflus, came out against the Commanders right after the bye week last season also. Well, what do you know? It's the Commanders right out of the bye week again this season. What a weird scheduling quirk that back-to-back years the Bears get the Commanders right after their bye week. It seems like it's always right around this time of the season too, with this one being in week 6. I think last year was in week 7, and 2 years ago they played the Commanders on Thursday Night Football in week 5. It's just an interesting spot, but that to me is the other immediate big game that stands out in this one. That it's again another primetime national broadcast game. I think that one's also Monday Night Football, if I'm not mistaken. The Caleb Williams versus Jaden Daniels Part 2 showdown rematch. And more than anything else, that game is an opportunity for us to be able to all move on from the Hail Mary from last year, because that's all anyone's going to be talking about in all the pregame talk in the lead up to that game. And to me, it's almost like win or lose for the Bears. It'll be something else to talk about, and it won't be the last immediate thing for Bears Commanders history. So I think even unless the Bears lose it on a Hail Mary again, you're going to leave that game with some amount of monkey off your back that even if you lose, at least you can say, hey, we lost the way we were supposed to, or the way we should, or fair and square, ideally, if you do lose, or maybe you win, but even in the worst case scenario you lose, you can lose more honorably than a Hail Mary, and then we can all kind of bury that and move on with the rest of our lives. Moving on with the rest of the schedule, next thing that jumps out to me is 2 Green Bay Packers games in 3 weeks. You play the Packers in week 14, and then you play the Packers again on week 16. That's going to be a Saturday game, as it's been announced so far. And I think in between so the first game is after Black Friday, I guess would be because Black Friday is the week 13 game against the Eagles. Then you go Packers, Browns, Packers, back to back there. It's an interesting stretch where in that first Packers matchup, Green Bay will just have been on Thanksgiving, and the Bears will just have been on Black Friday, so both teams will have extra time to prepare for Bears-Packers, and then 2 weeks later, you're preparing for the same Bears-Packers team. It's kind of like the stretch we saw last year when the Bears had 5 NFC North games in 6 weeks, where you played the Lions and Vikings twice in a 4-week stretch or whatever that was, or I guess twice in the 6-week stretch, but with not very many games in between. That's going to be interesting. It would have been nice to sort of get like a before and after where you play the Packers early, and then you feel like later in the season you can change up what you're doing and give them a better punch the following game and maybe have more of a chess match there. But back-to-back games, there's not going to be a lot of opportunity to get those changes in with that much time, or that little time, I should say, in between. And then the last thing is this stretch. I always pay attention to the stretch leading into the playoffs. If the Bears are going to be a playoff team this year, which is up in the air, not out of the question, but not guaranteed either, I always pay attention to what were the team's last few games before getting into the postseason. Sometimes you can see a team get beat up in their final 2 or 3 games and then kind of flame out in the postseason. And sometimes you can see a team really heat up with maybe even a lighter schedule heading into the playoffs, and then they're on fire and they ride that into a playoff run. And the Bears' last 4 games are Browns, Packers, 49ers, Lions. Browns should be easy. Packers, 49ers, Lions, we'll see. 2 really important divisional games there, and then the 49ers seem to kind of Jekyll and Hyde with some real unpredictability there that makes it kind of hard to predict exactly how it's going to go. But at the very least, you could say the Bears will be battle tested. If they're going to make the postseason, they will have earned it by playing some of these pretty good teams and important divisional games down the stretch. But I think the 49ers game in particular represents the biggest takeaway from this Bears schedule for me. It's not necessarily about the order, but it's the teams and how there's a couple of teams in the schedule that you can kind of pencil in as easy wins. There's a couple of teams in the schedule that you can pencil in as like, yeah, that one's going to be tough to win and probably not going to automatically win that game. Probably surefire losses there. But there's 10, 11, 12 games on this schedule that are really up in the air for me, where it's like, it's hard to predict. And we'll go through a full win-loss schedule prediction here as well, but I want to take some time to talk about the teams, kind of where each team on the schedule falls in terms of how tough they look on paper. Next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And right now is a great time to get in on the action with FanDuel. You can already bet on some of these games released in the NFL schedule this upcoming season. Week 1 odds, Bears hosting the Minnesota Vikings on Monday Night Football. Bears are opening as 1.5-point underdogs at home. The money line has Vikings minus 110 and Bears minus 106. The over-under set of that game at 45.5 points. A lot of time between now and then, but if you want to get on the action, or you can bet Bears-Eagles already in that schedule as well, you can do it all in the FanDuel app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. There's also NBA playoff betting, baseball season, hockey playoffs, soccer, tennis, boxing, all of your favorite sports. They've got it all with FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If that bet wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets added on top of your winnings. So make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NFL. So the Bears have a schedule that's not the kind of murderer's row that we felt like last season. Remember when the schedule came out a year ago and we knew there was that stretch. There was those 5 division games in 6 weeks, and the team in the middle of that was the San Francisco 49ers, who we thought would be a powerhouse. They ended up not being as good, but still demolished the Chicago Bears over that stretch. But we went on paper saying, okay, there's an easy stretch in the beginning there with what was the Colts and the Rams and the Cardinals and the Jaguars, and the Arizona Cardinals were supposed to be a bad team in there. And then you get your really tough stretch with Packers, Vikings, Lions, 49ers, Vikings, Lions last year. And for all accounts and purposes, like, it did generally turn out that way. The Rams, Panthers, and Jaguars were easier games for the Bears, and that division stretch with the 49ers were all tough games for the Bears. Games the Bears should have won within there, but they did lose all of those games. I mean, lost 10 or 11 in a row before beating the Packers in week 18. So that was one where a lot of what we thought on paper came to fruition for this past season's Bears schedule. Maybe not in the exact way we thought it would. Again, 49ers finished 6-11, but beat the crap out of the Bears. So they weren't a good team, but still the game functionally was just as hard for the Bears as if the 49ers were a really good team. And so when I try and take that same lens to look at this new Bears schedule, it doesn't shake out in nearly the same way. When you think about if you have an informal power ranking in your head of how good teams are, or even you can just base it off of last season's records, even though that's probably not the most accurate way to measure it. Like this schedule doesn't have a stretch of like more than 2 really tough games in a row, right? It kind of depends on how good some of these teams are. Like you've got the Ravens in week 8, followed by the Bengals in week 9. And if Burrow and the Bengals really bounce back, that's going to be a really tough back-to-back stretch. But before those 2 teams, you got the Saints in week 7, who should be pretty bad, and then the Giants in week 10, who I'm not expecting to take some massive leap forward with Russell Wilson. And then, you go a little bit later from there, like it could be a tough schedule to go Vikings, Steelers, Eagles, Packers, week 11, 12, 13, 14, but it depends on how good the Vikings are. It depends on how good the Steelers are. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be their quarterback? If he's not, Steelers shouldn't be any good. And even if it is Rodgers, how good will they be by week 12? Is Rodgers healthy? I mean, it's a lot of wild cards there with the Steelers, but that could be a pretty tough stretch. But then that's right before that. The game before that is the Giants, and right after that is the Browns. Like you kind of have, anytime you get a couple of tough teams here, you got some little sprinkles of easier teams in there. The Raiders in week 4, like right before the bye week, and then the Commanders, right? You get some breaks in here. You also don't have more than, you have a couple of back-to-back road games, like at Ravens, at Bengals, and then at Eagles, at Packers, but that's about it. You don't get any of those crazy tough stretches where you're gone for, 4 weeks out of 5 in a month where you're never really getting at home much. Like there's a little bit of that around the bye week where you go at Raiders and then week 5 bye and then at Commanders, home versus the Saints, and then at Ravens, at Bengals. Like that's 4 road games in 6 weeks, but you get a bye week in between there. So that makes a pretty big difference. And again, easy teams for a few of those to kind of give you that breather there. So as I look at this Bears schedule, I think it's hard to find that easy breezy light stretch. I mean, maybe if Dallas in week 3 isn't very good this season under Brian Schottenheimer, but a lot of reason why they were bad last year is because Dak Prescott was hurt. So if Prescott's healthy, the Cowboys should be better. But if they're bad, if you go Cowboys Raiders into the bye week, that could be a nice lighter type of a stretch there. But that's really kind of it. I mean, if the Vikings and Steelers turn out to be bad, then Giants, Vikings, Steelers could be an easy stretch, weeks 10, 11, and 12 there. But most of the time, you kind of go a couple of good teams, bad team. A couple of decent teams, bad team. Couple of good teams, bad teams, and it's kind of your whole schedule sparsed out over the course of the year. And so that's not to say that like you're automatically going to win all those games and automatically going to lose the tougher ones, but I think it's a nice sprinkling where you're not getting into this dread part of the schedule that's just really, really tricky to get through. And you're like, at some point, I think in the schedule last season, the specter of like, oh, all these tough games are coming up ends up building off some of the hype there and not really like not really reflecting the teams as a whole. It's like you almost make the idea of them like, oh, this is going to be a tough stretch. Those teams are so tough. And we really got to buckle down here because this is going to be really, really tough. And like you talk yourself into them being better than you should. And the same thing can happen with an easy schedule, and you can or easy stretches of the schedule where you can kind of lull yourself into it and say, oh, well, these teams aren't going to be so hard, so we can just kind of put it on cruise control and cruise through. I just don't necessarily think we have either of those standing out in this schedule right here. And I like the balance that way. This schedule doesn't necessarily allow for streaks. You know, it's not conducive to, and maybe I see this as a positive because of what we've been experiencing lately. But like this schedule is not conducive to going on a losing streak, right? You're never going to get more than a few really good teams in a row before you get a bad team that should break if you do go on a losing streak. But conversely, you don't really get a lot of space for a winning streak unless you're just really, really good, right? Like that's kind of. It usually takes you being really good to go on a winning streak, right? But it's hard to find stretches where you win maybe more than 2 in a row. You know, like if you could go Dallas and Raiders back-to-back could be 2 in a row, or maybe Giants-Vikings could be 2 in a row, or Vikings-Steelers, or maybe, you know, Packers and Browns. If you beat the Packers in one of those, you could find a 2-week stretch there that feels like you could have a couple, but like it's hard to string together like, oh, where did the Bears rip off a 5-game winning streak here? Because you're going to be interrupted by the Ravens in week 8 or the Eagles in week 13 and divisional games sprinkled throughout. That's one of the other nice things about this schedule is it's not the divisional games all clumped up. A couple right away, and you get a nice pause, and then you get a couple in the middle and a couple at the end. It's other than the Packers being kind of every other week there's a nice spreading out there. So you don't have to be locked into like full divisional playoff intensity games. It can be really draining. I think the stretch the Bears were on last week, not just for us as fans, but the players. Like when you get up for those divisional games, just a little bit more than you get up for every other game because it just matters more. It just means more when you're playing the Packers, especially. And if you have to do that and get up for the Vikings game, get up for the Lions game in like 4 straight weeks, especially when the Bears were losing those games, it's just really defeating energetically when you put so much in and don't get the reward at the end. So to be able to space that out with the Browns, with the 49ers, you know, with the Steelers or the Eagles in there, even though some of those teams might end up being pretty good, at least it's a different emotional investment at those points of the schedule that make it so it's chopped up and spread out really, really nicely, I think, in a way that's balanced. Maybe it's not the most favorable for the Chicago Bears. Would you like to kind of bookend all your hard games with easy games? And of course, if you could rearrange the schedule, there's ways you could do it. But I think this is generally, at worst, neutral for the Bears, if not favorable in terms of the ordering and the strengthening. Not too many prime time games. I mean, a couple of their standalone national games. The Eagles are a day game. The Packers on that Saturday will likely be a day game. And then it's a couple of Monday night games and a Sunday night game. But no Thursday night game. Only one short week is the Eagles on Black Friday, so it's a little less short than than Thursday Night Football. I guess the Saturday game is also slightly shorter, but you're not getting the super, super short weeks. You get a couple of slightly shorter weeks as opposed to last year. Was it 2 or felt like 3? It was 3 Thursday night games last year, right? Or is it just Thanksgiving and then the Seahawks at the end? Nonetheless, the Bears had a lot of Thursdays lately, and it's nice to not have a Thursday night football game. So how do we then start to go through and say win-loss here? How do we sparse this out? And I want to go through the good teams, the bad teams, and the toss-up teams to figure out then where the Bears' win-loss record most likely lands next on Locked On Bears. Even before the actual order of the schedule came out, I think just looking at the teams on the Bears' schedule, I've said all along, this feels like a Bears team that's somewhere between, 7 wins on the absolute lowest side of the spectrum and probably I don't know, 11 wins at the absolute highest in terms of like best and worst case scenarios for how this season goes. But generally, if those are kind of the range of the spectrum, I find myself hovering around like 8 or 9 wins, maybe 10 is sort of the more optimistic there. But 9 is kind of where I settle on here generally for this Bears schedule on paper in May, before we see what else the Bears do, what else these other teams do, who's healthy when the Bears play them, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of factors go into how you win and lose these games. But on paper, I look at this Bears schedule and I see 4 teams that I think on paper should be fairly easy wins. It's the Las Vegas Raiders in week 4. It's the New Orleans Saints in week 7. It's the New York Giants in week 10. And it's the Cleveland Browns in week 15. The Giants are maybe the toughest of the 4 there, but like on paper, the Saints, Browns, and Raiders look like bad football teams. And the Giants, I don't think will be a very good football team either. They're not going to be the 4 worst, well, maybe one of them, but like, are they all going to be picking in the top 5 of the NFL draft? No, but those are 4 teams who should all be worse than the Bears and should be pencil them in as W's early on in the schedule. I also look at the schedule and see a couple of teams that I think are clearly going to be better than the Bears on paper, and I'm going to pencil those in as losses until we see otherwise. And for me, the only 2 that I'm like dead set on that are the Baltimore Ravens and the Philadelphia Eagles. I mean, Eagles won the Super Bowl. Ravens are a really, really good football team. Like those 2 teams should absolutely be better than the Bears. Then the next 2 that I still think are probably toss-ups, but I would lean loss are the Bengals and the Washington Commanders. Like, yes, the Bears played the Commanders very close last season. The Bears played a lot of teams really close last season and still lost all of them. But given how the Commanders looked in the postseason and some of the things they've done, like, I think the Commanders should still be a better team than the Bears this season. And if the Bengals can get back to being the Bengals, I think they should still be better than the Bears. But those games are much less sure in my mind. Those are still in the toss-up category, but they're sort of on the higher end of the toss-up category. The other toss-up teams for me, where I don't know if they're going to be good or not good, are 3 teams we mentioned. The Dallas Cowboys in week 3, the Pittsburgh Steelers in week 12, and the 49ers in week 17. I could see any of those 3 teams making the playoffs and looking really good. I could see all 3 of those teams missing the playoffs and looking really bad. And that's what makes this schedule hard to predict. Let's not forget also, I think all 3 NFC North teams are in a similar category where the Lions lost both their coordinators and a couple of pieces of talent, not a ton of players for the most part. I mean, they swapped out right guards, and I think 1 or 2 guys on defense have changed hands, but for the most part, the players are the same, but the coaching staff change could be super significant and could make the Lions much worse, or the Lions could pick right back up where they were and win the NFC North again and win double-digit games. They're a pretty unpredictable team for me right now on paper. You know, by the time the Bears play the Lions in week 18, we'll know. But when the Bears play the Lions in week 2, I don't think we'll know yet. Because even if they win week 1, like a lot of weird things happen in week 1, and week 1 lies and doesn't always reflect how the rest of the season is going to go for the teams that performed in week 1. So the Lions are tricky. The Vikings have a rookie quarterback and definitely overachieved last season with Sam Darnold. So are they going to overachieve the same way with, even if they had Sam Darnold again, I don't think they would overachieve the same way. And now you make it a rookie quarterback. It could either be, a Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix kind of rookie season, or it could be, I mean, he's not a rookie, I suppose, but a first year starting quarterback. Or it could be, more regular rookie first-year starter growing pains of, he's going to make some mistakes sometimes and has a lot to learn, and teams are going to throw some stuff at J.J. McCarthy that he's never seen. And so I like that a lot in week 1. Maybe by week 11, that's less of a factor when the Bears play them the second time, but the Vikings could be a 7 or 6 win team, or they could be an 11 or 12 win team, and I don't have a good sense of how good they're actually going to be this season, depending on what J.J. McCarthy ends up being. I don't think they're going to be horrible. It's just a matter of how good they actually are. And then even Green Bay is probably the most stable of the other NFC North opponents, but I didn't really see them get a lot better this offseason. I mean, I don't like exactly what they did with the offensive line. I don't think their free agent sign there was a very smart decision. They added another wide receiver. That's good for them, and they will have more weapons for sure, but still a young team. didn't do much different on defense, and there were some ups and down moments there. So we'll see what their pass rush ends up looking like this year. Like, I think the Packers, maybe they're largely the same team. And the Bears beat the Packers last season and should have beaten them twice, if not for a blocked field goal at the very end of the first game. So that's where it's really, really hard to sit here and say, exactly the exact win-loss order and the exact total, because I think you can kind of coin flip the Cowboys, the Steelers, and the 49ers, and maybe you can coin flip the Commanders and the Bengals there. And I think you can kind of coin flip some of the divisional games here. So if we take the 4 easy wins, plus let's say you coin toss split the 6 division games, you split them 3-3, so that's 7 wins. And then you coin toss split those 5 teams that I think are toss-ups, and that's 2.5 more wins. It would put you at 9.5, right? So you would either be a 9-win team if you lose one of those games, or you're a 10-win team if you win one of those games. Like I think ultimately, when you play the Cowboys, Steelers, Commanders, 49ers, and Bengals, you'll win 2 or 3 of those games. And maybe you'll lose one that you're not supposed to lose because it's a first year under Ben Johnson. It's the second year with Caleb Williams under center. Like, there's going to be mistakes and growing pains and moments of learning and things you would regret and want to take back. It shouldn't be as bad as embarrassing as some of the stuff that happened under Matt Eberflus, but there's going to be mistakes. That's natural in a football season. Not everything is going to be perfect. But you can also see where you could go on a great stretch where you're like, yeah, maybe the Cowboys and Steelers are bad again, and the 49ers are bad again. The Bengals don't take a step forward, and you smoke all those teams. And so you beat the Saints, Browns, Giants, Raiders, Cowboys, Steelers, 49ers. That's 7 wins, not including any of your division games. So then you split division games, that's 10 wins. If you sweep one of your opponents, if they're not very good, that's 11 wins, right? You can find yourself easily talking yourself into a double-digit win season. Or you can have the Lions still be really good, and the Vikings pick back up right where they left off with McCarthy instead of Darnold, but Darnold, had his ups and downs in that stretch. And the Packers pick up where they left off, and those 3 games are all really, really hard. And then the Cowboys are better with a healthy Prescott. The Steelers are better with Aaron Rodgers. The Commanders are still great. The 49ers are healthy with Purdy and McCaffrey, and they're good. And the Bengals get back to it with Joe Burrow. And all of a sudden, you're a little bit closer to 7 wins there because you beat the 4 bad teams and maybe take a division game or 2, and then one of those non-divisional games, maybe you beat the Cowboys or you beat the Steelers in there. But that's how you end up at 7 wins if some of these teams just end up being really, really good. So I end up landing at 9 wins. That's where I see this Bears schedule. The exact teams they beat isn't as important to me because I think they'll beat 3 of the Cowboys, Steelers, Commanders, 49ers, Bengals, and then, split some division games and win some of the easy games and lose some of the tough games. And that to me is a 9-win season. And as it sort of spaces out, maybe you beat the Vikings in week 1, but then lose to the Lions in week 2, but then beat the Cowboys in week 3 and beat the Raiders in week 4. So you're 3-1 going to the bye week on top of the world, but then you lose the Commanders out of the bye week to get to 3-2. You beat the Saints in week 7 to get to 4-2. Then you lose to the Ravens and the Bengals in 8 and 9. And all of a sudden you're down to 4-3. You bounce back with a win over the Giants to get to 5-3. Maybe you lose to the Vikings in week 11 on a heartbreaker to get you to 5-4. And then, you lose, maybe you go on a little bit of a losing streak here and you lose to the Steelers in week 12 to get to 5-5, lose to the Eagles in week 13 to get to 5-6, but you bounce back after Black Friday and beat the Packers in Lambeau Field, to get to, what would that be? Lost track of my record here. 6-5 at that point. And then you beat the Browns, you go on a winning streak, but maybe then you lose to the Packers on the Saturday game, but then beat the 49ers and then beat the Lions in week 18 to get that 9th win and feel like, okay, we've accomplished something this season, even if it wasn't a double-digit win deep playoff run. Maybe that gets you to 9-8 and you just miss the wild card spot. You're the 8th seed in the NFC, and maybe you're 3rd or 4th in the NFC North, but gosh darn it, you had a good season. And you showed a lot of promise, and you look like a team that's ready to take the jump in 2026 in year 2 with Ben Johnson. Like, that's all you can, that should be enough. Obviously, you want to aim higher and have higher goals and hope for more, but you don't want to expect too much more than that. Play better, show some fight, look competitive, and give you a lot of reason to be optimistic for the future and the long-term future of Ben Johnson, of Caleb Williams, and then the short-term future of what this team could accomplish with one more good offseason in 2026. That's what this year's schedule is all about. So I hope this schedule breakdown will help give you some more context around who and when and what the Bears are playing and what parts of the schedule are most important. Really appreciate you making Locked On Bears your first listen today. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. If you're looking for a second listen today, you can always find more football talk on Locked On NFL, Locked On NFL Draft, and Locked On NFL Scouting. Or the Locked On Podcast Network has all your favorite teams covered in the NBA, NHL, MLB, and college sports. So go listen to another Locked On podcast over there for a second listen. Coming back tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Bears and another opportunity to bear down.